Hello, I'm Eleanor. Until last year, my sister Zoe was my only friend in the world. When she got married, I thought I'd lose touch with her forever. But I chose to take a rather selfish path to prevent that from happening, and I hope you can understand my reasons as you hear my story. My bond with my older sister, Zoe, has always been strong. When we were kids, she exuded confidence and had a great sense of humor, while I remained quiet and shy. Our dad was seldom around, and our mom passed away when I was a teenager, leaving just Zoe and me. Tragedy struck when I was driving to work one fateful day. I was hit by a car that ran a red light. I woke up 2 days later to discover the extent of my injuries. I survived the accident, but I would spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair. The compensation I received meant I didn't have to work, but it also meant my world became incredibly small. I spent each day at home, eagerly awaiting Zoe's return from work. I didn't have many friends prior to the accident, and the thought of facing them afterward was daunting. Gradually, Zoe became the only person I interacted with. She was outgoing and loved going out, constantly inviting me to join her. I always declined. She even posted advertisements for local events on the fridge with magnets, hoping I'd find something I wanted to attend. She urged me not to let my disability hold me back, but I remained stubborn. I believed that everyone would look at me with pity and that no one would want to be around me. I didn't mind Zoe going out without me, and I found solace in hearing about her adventures with friends. Then one day, she told me she had met a man named Austin, a businessman from Australia who asked her out. According to her, they met in a coffee shop when he accidentally picked up her Americano, thinking it was his latte. I thought it was the most cliched pickup line ever. Zoe began spending more and more time with Austin, and she seemed different since meeting him. Things were progressing rapidly, and I couldn't help but worry. How could she spend so much time with a man she barely knew? One evening, she invited him to dinner to introduce him to me. I had reservations about Austin. How could my sister be certain that he had genuine intentions? I attempted to discuss it with Zoe, but she became furious and insisted that I needed to focus on my own life and spend more time outside the house. I wouldn't relent, suspecting that she was deflecting the conversation away from her and Austin. I decided to let the matter rest temporarily before revisiting it. One day, Zoe returned home brimming with excitement, revealing that Austin had proposed to her in a restaurant, and she had accepted. I questioned whether she had truly considered marrying someone she had known for less than a year. However, she grew irate and instructed me to contemplate my own happiness without interfering in hers. Nonetheless, I remained convinced that Austin was not as perfect as Zoe portrayed him to be, so I embarked on an investigation. I turned to Google to learn more about him, uncovering his Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn profiles. Fearing he might notice my snooping, I created a fake account to follow him. It wasn't long before I realized that there was another woman involved. Sarah had liked numerous of his Facebook posts and began showing interest in his Instagram photos. Since all her social media accounts were public, I could observe everything she posted. One evening, I noticed that she had checked into an upscale bar in town. Curious, I inquired with Zoe about Austin's whereabouts, and she mentioned he was at a bar for a business meeting. I disclosed my findings to Zoe, explaining my suspicions about Austin and Sarah. She was incensed that I had been monitoring her fiancé's movements. I urged her to go to the bar and verify whether I was mistaken. In a fit of anger, she stormed out of the house and headed to the bar to confront him. I anxiously waited for her return, which occurred an hour later with tears in her eyes. Zoe had visited the bar and witnessed Austin and Sarah sharing a drink together. Upon spotting Zoe, Austin had appeared uncomfortable, as though he had been caught. Zoe confronted him, but he refused to disclose who Sarah was. Distraught, she flung her engagement ring back at him and declared that she never wanted to see him again. She rushed out of the bar, never looking back. For the following few days, Zoe remained in bed, and for once I had to take care of her. Austin kept calling, but she ignored his calls and eventually blocked his number. Then one day, he showed up at our doorstep. I answered the door and firmly told him to leave, but he paid no heed. He brushed past me and entered her room to see her. They engaged in a heated argument, shouting and screaming at each other for what felt like an eternity. Then suddenly, everything went silent. An hour later, they emerged from her room hand in hand. I noticed Zoe was wearing her engagement ring again. I inquired about what had transpired, and she informed me that I had been mistaken. Austin hadn't been on a date at the bar or engaged in an affair. Sarah was an old friend who had offered him a job. He had met her in secret because he didn't want to tell Zoe, fearing that he might not secure the position. However, he had indeed landed the job and accepted it. Zoe explained that she had not only agreed to marry Austin, but had also decided to move with him to Australia for his new job. I lashed out at her, insisting that she couldn't leave me. She tried to reason with me, but I was so consumed by anger and distress that I refused to listen. She told me that my jealousy had gotten the best of me and that I needed to learn to take care of myself. She departed with Austin, and as she walked away, I yelled after her, initially contemplating following her, but the thought of stepping outside was too overwhelming. I screamed and pleaded for her to return, but she continued walking away. 2 weeks later, it was her wedding day, and I served as the maid of honor. Some of Zoe's friends were bridesmaids, and they tried to engage with me, expressing their pleasure at finally meeting me. However, I wanted nothing to do with them. All I could think about was my intense resentment toward Austin for seemingly turning my sister against me. Following the ceremony, he attempted to speak with me, but I refused any interaction with the man who had taken my sister away from me. A week after the wedding, Zoe emigrated to Australia, leaving me behind. As she headed to the airport, I stayed in my room, refusing to bid her farewell. Her departure left me feeling utterly numb. I remained confined to the house for the next few days, relying on food deliveries and avoiding interaction with anyone. There was no one to talk to, even though Zoe called me numerous times. I chose not to answer until she left a voicemail threatening to involve the police. In response, I sent her a text to reassure her that I was fine, but requested that she leave me alone. A few days later, I received a letter from Zoe explaining one of the reasons for her departure. She wanted me to learn to stand on my own 2 feet. I couldn't help but chuckle when I read it, considering my wheelchair-bound state. Technically, I wouldn't be able to stand again. However, beneath Zoe's words lay a message she was attempting to convey. I needed to overcome my loneliness and redirect my anger away from her and Austin, focusing on taking care of myself. A sense of panic overcame me. Apart from Zoe's wedding, I hadn't left the house in months. How could I manage it now, especially without Zoe's support? I had to contemplate my options. While in the kitchen making a cup of tea, I noticed the posters Zoe had put up on the refrigerator, hoping I might find an event or club that piqued my interest. I resolved to be brave. I closed my eyes and randomly selected an ad, promising myself that I would attend whatever it was. When I opened my eyes, I found it was an advertisement for a weekly movie quiz at a nearby pub. Despite my nervousness, I was determined to go. I kept reminding myself of Zoe's advice to stand on my own 2 feet. On the night of the quiz, fear coursed through me. I couldn't help but question why I had thought going to a pub quiz by myself was a good idea. I didn't know anyone there, and I worried that no one would want me on their team. Taking a deep breath, I entered the pub, my hands trembling. The bar fell silent, and everyone at the table nearest to me turned to look, a scene I had feared, people staring at my wheelchair. Then, a man stood up and approached me, wearing a warm smile as he introduced himself. He kindly invited me to join their team because they were short one member. A wave of relief washed over me as I realized that they weren't staring at my wheelchair. They were genuinely delighted to welcome a new face, and life has become much more exhilarating since that moment. I now attend the quiz every week with my newfound friends, and I've even reconnected with some of Zoe's friends whom I met at her wedding. Hearing so much about them from Zoe, I feel like I've known them for years. I now enjoy a vibrant social life and venture out more than I have in a long time. Zoe was spot on. My loneliness was largely a product of my lack of self-confidence. Her decision to leave me was the push I needed to muster the courage to step out and make new friends. Yet, I'm aware there's another significant challenge I must confront, and it's undoubtedly my most daunting one yet. I've just purchased a plane ticket to visit Zoe in Australia. This trip marks my first solo flight and my initial journey since the accident. Zoe remains unaware of my impending visit, and I can hardly contain my excitement about surprising her. Maintaining the secret hasn't been easy, but I received considerable assistance from Austin. Surprisingly, it was his idea. He's not as bad as my initial impression led me to believe. In fact, he's a genuinely nice guy, and I'm grateful that Zoe met him. If he hadn't become my sister's husband, I might never have discovered the depth of my inner strength.